That song really stuck. That song really nailed the ending. That was good.
Right?
Right? Yeah, it certainly did. You know who nailed the beginning? The three of us. Here we are. It's Mutants and Masterminds Monday, and everyone can hear us.
Mm-hmm. And see
Everyone
us?
can see us, and we can hear and see each other. And some groovy tunes played.
Crazy.
It's literally crazy. Sean Vieira says, "Good Monday afternoon," and Sean, good Monday to you, my friend. Apoof grooving to the tunes. What a discovery that I have made in my technical journey. That it turns out, guys, listen to this, guys. If you simplify, if you only run one program instead of 4, everything runs a lot smoother. We actually get to run Mutants and Masterminds Monday, and so we are a little late. It is all my fault, though I did threaten to blame it on Alex just for funsies. We have got quite a program. We are talking about Freedom City. We're going to go through the book. We're going to look at the map. And, Alex, did you know that Steve Kenson actually authored this with, I'm sure, some help and some partnerships and here and there. And but
3 times.
I had no idea.
You didn't know? Yeah. See, I didn't think you knew. It's one of our worst kept secrets. And Steve, I'm constantly, I have these moments where I'm like hanging out with Steve. It's Steve. It's just Steve. And then I'm reminded at your, just the depth and breadth of your career and the contributions that you made to the tabletop roleplay space. And as I'm trying to think of what an adequate title would be, and I'm thinking maybe Daddy. Does that feel right?
Hey, I have embraced my daddy years, so I have owned that.
Fantastic. So, Daddy, walk us through, if you will, the talk to me about the genesis of the Freedom City book and the work that went into it, how long it took, kind of some of the design intention and all that good stuff, and let's kick it off.
Okay. Well, I've told the origin of Freedom City many times, so rather than get into the like how the whole thing came about story again, I'm going to let folks and their search engines track down one of the many versions of me talking about it, and talk a little bit about the 3rd edition book specifically.
Love it.
Because this is, and we're talking about the 3rd edition of Freedom City. There's been 1 edition of Freedom City for each edition of Mutants and Masterminds. And the 3rd edition Freedom City book actually came kind of late. Freedom City has a great housing market. Yeah, it probably does right now.
Insurance is horrible, though.
Yeah. The 3rd edition Freedom City book actually came relatively late in the development cycle of Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, because we developed the 3rd edition of M&M in parallel with the development of DC Adventures. And the DC Adventures Heroes Handbook was basically sort of the premiere of the 3rd edition rules. When we were developing the 3rd edition of M&M, John Lighthouser and I worked on developing the Emerald City setting, because we wanted to introduce sort of a new corner of the Earth Prime setting for players to explore outside of Freedom City. So Emerald City was really the first 3rd edition setting we developed, and it wasn't until many months later that we got back around to updating Freedom City, so far as that went. So, when we tackled the 3rd edition Freedom City book, we worked on the assumption that all of the stuff in Emerald City and Emerald City Knights, the Silver Storm, and all the other developments in the setting had already come about. And so we were looking at updating Freedom City with really the biggest update that we had done to it since we had introduced the setting, because there had been a relatively small gap between the first and second edition of Freedom City, and there was a much longer one between second and third edition. So you can see that from the cover, from the makeup of the Freedom League and the characters in the city. We had done a lot more development to different elements of the city. Those twisty buildings in the background are Pyramid Plaza, and we had done a whole series called Freedom City Atlas for a while, where we were doing interesting bits of development, and Philip Leno, who had did the amazing Freedom City map, was messing around with different aspects of the city. Philip is an architect by trade, and so he was having fun, like designing and redesigning buildings and locations in the city. And Philip had a great knack for, how shall I put this, for assuming that I knew what I was talking about. And Philip would often do things like, so I don't know if you meant this, but I'm going to assume that you did, and I found out a way to make it actually work, like the way you describe it, even though the way you describe it is clearly insane. And no one would actually do this. But
I think that's, Steve, you just have a way of saying things in a way that people are like, okay, yeah, that's true. Steve said it, obviously.
Apparently I made it believable enough.
I love it. And that is actually a character trait of Steve, is that, we end up talking about some of the more bizarre things just because of tabletop roleplay. I mean, who knows? But you always sound legit. Yeah.
So,
it's confidence.
So things like, how Pyramid Plaza actually looks, that was the first time we ever actually visualized it. And Philip did a brilliant, this whole isometric projection of, how the buildings would look and all of that. And he's like, actually, he's like, really, the design is really cool. And he's like, I kind of wish somebody would build something like this.
I love it. Where is Pyramid Plaza as it relates? Like, is it the city center or?
Pyramid Plaza is near the city center. It's in a district of the city called the Waiting Way, which is basically Freedom City's financial district. So it's one of the big sort of corporate plazas that you see in big urban downtown areas. It's very much the sort of monument to capitalism.
Gotcha, found it. This map is something else.
Yeah, Philip did an amazing job with this map. Again, Philip is an architect and an urban planner. So, he, did stuff with the design of this map that I would have never thought of.
Very visually satisfying.
Yeah, it really is.
I love it. Okay, so we can hop back to our Freedom City, to the book, and kind of, I want to just grab Alex here for a minute. So Alex, you said this is one of those settings that you really knew well.
Yeah. And I should specify that I started Mutants and Masterminds with third edition, so everything I know about Freedom City is third edition on. Which is funny because I have a couple of players in my stream who are like, the journey from second edition to third edition was awesome, except for next gen. They all got screwed when they grew up.
Hey, it's rough being a child hero.
It is rough being a child hero.
It doesn't always work out so well.
Bolt lost his body, and Nereid went back to Atlantis to be emo. And Megastar's up in space being like a semi-bad guy.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, Alex, did you dive into this right away? Like, was this one of the pieces that you picked up as sort of like your foray into Mutants and Masterminds?
Actually, I started off Mutants and Masterminds doing DC stuff because I was brought in for DC Adventures. That's where I was sort of that was sort of what my mindset was. And then I moved into developing Titan City, which is my setting. And then I finally came in. I was like, okay, I want to know everything about Freedom City because I love some of these characters that I'm seeing, and I want to know what the setting is like. Because what I love about Freedom City is it feels like it's a comic book universe without just being derivative.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels like it could be a mashup of Marvel and DC's sort of New York City and Metropolis, but it has enough of its own legs to stand on, and it's clearly influenced by modern ideals and modern, design policy, and it's a dynamic setting that changes as the game goes on, which I think is awesome.
Sean Vieira asks a really great question that I'm gonna highlight here, and that is, do you have a favorite non-hero villain normal resident of Freedom City?
A lot of my favorite ones, you see, I have to rule out a bunch of my favorite ones because they're all former heroes or former villains and all of that. So if we throw out most of them, I love like old Fletcher Beaumont, the guy who was the original Bowman and all of that, as characters. But if we put all those characters aside, I'm fond of there's a guy called Roger Omack, who's a helicopter pilot, who was named after the comic book character Omack. And he's like, like the, I in the sky, with Roger Omack guy. And he's a character I've had fun with in games because he's a daring helicopter pilot who's always flying the newscopter like too close to the fights, I love so it. I mean, his helicopter has gotten shot out of the sky like, more times than most people can count.
That could be a really fun kind of long-term shtick of how many different ways can this guy come kind of, sailing into this, war zone.
Pretty much.
I love it. So that is pretty, I love to kind of hear how people onboard into Mutants and Masterminds, because I think that having that conversation and discussing, people are going to be like, that's like me, and then look at you now. Mm-hmm. Alex, you're up to your eyeballs in Mutants and Masterminds.
Yeah, I sure am.
You're at the source, which is awesome. But yeah, so given that we've got a whole book to go through, how do we want to parse this out?
I do just want to shout out Sophia Cruz is my favorite non-hero person.
Sorry, yes,
in Freedom City.
Now, who's that?
She is sort of the head of the foundation at Pyramid Plaza, and she's the person who has to keep the Scarab's lair safe and tidy until the real Scarab comes back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she's the one who's looking. Yeah, she's looking for candidates and stuff for the new Scarab, and that's a cool position to me.
Sophia's was kind of Scarab's Pepper Potts for people who watch the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If Iron Man was a magical hero, if Iron Man and Doctor Strange were the same guy, basically, she was his, sort of person who kept everything running because his head was not in that sort of a thing. But yeah, now he's long dead, and her job is kind of to preserve his legacy, which I think makes her a pretty interesting character.
Well, so I have a favorite character, a non-hero character, and it is the famed professor of archaeology and medieval metaphysics at FCU, and that would be Professor Dr. Apook.
Mm-hmm.
A real character, real weird one. That one.
Yep.
Not sure what the inspiration was, but wow, I'd like to meet that character. What a piece of work. But yeah, so phenomenal. Okay, so as I am clicking on all the buttons and getting us all set up, let's talk about let's talk about the book. Like, what do we got? What does this come with, first of all? So if I order this, just the PDF. Let's say.
Well, if it's just the electronic edition is obviously a PDF of the whole print book itself. You get the Hero Lab files for all of the characters in the book, and that's quite a few. I don't recall off the top of my head how many, but definitely over 50.
I think the scientific term is oodles.
Yeah, a lot.
Yes, yeah. I think that's right on the cover.
So you get the Hero Lab files for those. If you're using Hero Lab, that's super useful to just be able to open those up and to be able to modify them as you want, or to print them out in different formats, plug them into different documents. You get a high-resolution PDF of Philip's amazing map, which is great because you get to zoom in on it and screen capture segments of it and things like that. I do that all the time for zoomed-in maps of different street scenes and sections of the city and things like that.
I mean, yeah, and this map is just legitimately chef's kiss. I mean, it is just awesome.
It is. It's amazing. And I think that's pretty much the whole electronic package.
I think you're right. I've, so in downloading it today in prep for this, it talks about the Hero Lab files. You get the PDF, of course. You get that map, and then there's Wildcard, who's kind of hanging out there all by themselves.
Yeah, I don't know what that is as far as Evan's organization of things.
Right.
Well, it's funny because Wildcard is not a villain in the book, according to the table of contents.
You should. Oh, is Wildcard not in the book?
Warden is the last villain. I mean, unless he's in one of the groups. Let me double check.
He's in Crime League, so.
Oh, that's why. Yep.
Page 220. Yeah. I don't know why it's organized that way, but.
It could have been. I could imagine a world wherein there was a preparation. All the digital stuff was put together, and Wildcard might have been an addition.
Well, expect Wildcard to show up, where he's not supposed to.
Yeah, true. That's the name. But yeah. All right. So let me. I'm gonna pull up the. I love the art. The cover art is phenomenal. Who did that?
And I want to say the cover art. This is Conceptopolis Studio. Did the cover art for this.
Oh yes, right. That's right. And I'm getting there to share.
Because this, around the time of 3rd edition, was when we were working with a lot of studios as far as the production of art, especially for games like Mutants and Masterminds.
And so then, so interesting. And so that sort of arrangement has changed a bit, right? For in the evolution of the project.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when we worked on the 1st edition of Mutants and Masterminds, we worked with a lot of folks who are now professional comic book artists.
That's right.
Whom unfortunately, like the Ramon Perez, who did a lot of the art in the 1st edition of Freedom City, much of which is still in the current edition because it's amazing.
It's phenomenal.
Is a fantastic artist who we no longer can afford to work with because Ramon works for DC and Marvel now, and gets paid comic book artist money.
Now I do have a question. So we have an artist. There's one name that stuck out for me particularly, and that was Comfort Love.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to know, who they are. But we can go in the way back and find out.
I don't know. That's a question for Hal, unfortunately.
We will bug Hal and kind of say, hey, what up? And it will help if I do this. There we go. All right. Well, so here we are at the table of contents. Now you just start talking, and I'm going to start hustling, and I'll chase the contents.
All right. So the organization of the 3rd edition book is based on the way we organized Emerald City in terms of its structure. So there's a player's guide. In terms of the big divisions, there's a player's guide. There's a secrets of the city section, which is largely more of a game master facing section. And then there's a big section of heroes and villains in the back of the book. A huge chunk of Freedom City is character write-ups, just because there are so many characters in the setting. But the initial part of the book is the player's guide, is intended to be a sort of player-facing, this is what you need to know about the setting if your character lives there, so far as it goes. And we started off with the same approach Hal Mangold took to setting up Emerald City, which was that sort of welcome to the city brochure design, where, you know, we basically sort of, you know, we're like, you know, what would the, you know, Department of Tourism, you know, basically, you know, put up on their website, you know, in terms of, you know, getting people to come, you know, to town, essentially. And we took the added approach of having Mayor Summers basically do her, you know, sort of marginal notes, you know, of things like this. This is obviously the copy that she's approving, you know, for release.
The red line, yeah, it's so good. It is really very clever, and you know, the entire Mutants and Masterminds look is just quite literally iconic.
Mm-hmm.
It is so phenomenal,
and it's impressive just how much design and concept art went into these pages, because this is a small section of the book, but we have like a huge number of different snapshots of sort of iconic locations in the city. And for a lot of them, that was the first time that we had ever actually illustrated them, as far as, you know, this particular look. And I just loved putting together a lot of this artwork, because it was both describing what all of these places looked like, providing some reference shots, and pointing a lot of the artists at Philip's map and saying, well, basically it should be about here, and you should be looking east or looking north, and, you know, having people sort of orient themselves on the map and you know, basically come up with what that looked like. And we just got some amazing shots of it. I just love these slides to be able to just show them what the city looks like.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And a question I have for you. So as I'm looking at the mayor's notes, it's so funny because who kind of brought the mayor to life in this context? That
was pretty much all John, I think, as far as I recall.
It's great. Really did some work to kind of show the motivations of the, you know, it's so great. Like kind of doing a little sort of shit talking in the margins, you know, and I could just see this being a real embarrassment to the mayor, and, you know, it's really fun. Very, very fun.
It's probably stolen off of a desk by a young teenage hero.
Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just really, really good stuff. Can we add, who is that? Is it Guilfory's Donuts? They're just really, really great stuff. I love it, and it really lends sort of this kind of tangible feel to it. Let's see.
John says that I probably wrote the mayor stuff, so fair enough.
That you did?
Apparently.
Yeah. You know, and it's definitely brilliant stuff, and you know, it smacks of the Kenson brilliance. But let's see here. Thank you, Jonas.
One of the funny things of if you've been a writer in this business for any length of time is those occasions where you read something and are like, "Huh, this is pretty good," and then you go and look and you discover you wrote it.
That's right. Yeah, that happens a lot. Like I'll read, you know, especially if you just are preparing stuff for social media and you go back and you look and you're like, damn, that was really good.
Right?
I wonder
who did that?
So you start to feel like, who's doing social media?
It's me.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you, John, for shaking that loose.
I love that shot of the nucleus there on the right, the Atom family's headquarters. That nailed the look of that. You know, it's just like right out of a comic. It's terrific.
100%. So, John, I'm showing. You said that was me, not Hal. Are you talking about
the brochure?
Yeah, are you talking about the brochure, John? Is that you? I think that's probably what he's referring to. But feel free to correct us, John. You know, honestly, frankly. I would have you on, and maybe we should do that in the future, just to kind of talk about, your side of the brochure.
Yeah, the concept of the brochure was definitely John. I meant the design of it was Hal's.
Oh yes, gotcha. Good to good to clarify that. But really smart, great idea, and boy, it's a special touch that really makes kind of brings this stuff to life. All right, so as far as this goes, it's definitely informational. It definitely kind of sets the stage and gives you reference material. Is there anything about this particular, outside of being really clever and well, presented? Is there other, things that people should be on the lookout for, or Easter eggs, or any kind of information?
Well, gosh, ages ago, I did a write-up that was basically a list of all the Easter eggs in Freedom City. It's pretty extensive. I pretty much, I mean, if there's a characters are always named after somebody, pretty much. Lots of places and things are inspired by different comic book Easter eggs and things like that. So there's a ridiculous amount of that in Freedom City. Quite a few of them, in some cases, that I've completely forgotten what I was originally thinking when I did it.
I love that. Well, so, and the other thing too, more so along the lines of the that sort of city brochure. I mean, because it's a clever presentation of some detail, but it's also a functional, useful tool.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely something that you could cut these, pages out of a PDF and, hand them to players and say, hey, this is Freedom City.
So given the power of the internet, I have located Freedom City Annotated.
Yeah, there it is.
On SteveKenson.com, and it's 2005.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, wow,
that's been a bit of time. Just a little bit.
I was a freshman in high school.
I've aged more in the last few minutes than Steve has the entirety of his living life. So, given that he's 80, 90 years old, looking pretty darn good. So, let's see here. Okay, great. So, I love these quotes, hunting for former secret lairs in Greenbank is one of Freedom City's lesser-known tourist attractions.
Yeah, people need to stop doing that.
That's got to be a thing, like geocaching supervillain lairs.
Oh, it absolutely is a thing in Freedom City, and the heroes really wish people would stop doing that.
We need to make an adventure out of that.
I mean, the number of times that people have stumbled into somebody's lair and either set off the defense systems or woken up their doomsday device. Stop doing that.
Who left this preserver room here?
Right?
I love this. The mob history tour on the boardwalk is a great family activity. Colorful criminals. Yeah, really clever stuff. Love it. And so now we're kind of so then this chapter 1 is still sort of a something that it would be of interest to players and GMs, right?
Yeah. No. So chapter 1 is getting into the history, and the history section is good in terms of providing a lot of context. And one of the things that we wanted in Freedom City was that really strong feeling of legacy to the city. One of the popular elements of comic books, and sometimes their most challenging element is their history, is characters' continuity. And it's fun to know all of the interesting little historical bits about stuff. So we wanted to give the feeling that Freedom City was a city with a long superheroic history, which is why the history section is so long, and why it goes into all kinds of detail about that sort of thing.
What a great palette, though, to work from if you're, kind of wanting to spice it up or sort of add some depth and texture to.
That's the idea, is to make the history section as inspirational as possible, and especially to ensure that a lot of the historic elements are sort of out there floating around, so that you can do something with them.
I love that. Who's the first hero?
Freedom City's, well, depends on where you start.
Yeah.
Modern Freedom City's first hero was the Centurion.
Okay.
And he is sort of the hero who kicks off the sort of modern age, the 20th century age of superheroes, so far as that goes. He's the first real costumed, superpowered guy who is out there, stopping bad guys and, like picking up, bank robbers' cars, so far as that goes. But as the history section makes clear, Freedom City had masked and costumed heroes before Centurion.
Right.
But they weren't really, quite the same as superheroes, so far as that goes. It was much more sort of weird and mysterious masked people, before the beginning of the superheroic age.
Is that are we referring to like the pulp?
Yeah, there was a lot more of the sort of pulp mystery men types then.
Yeah.
And even sort of the Penny Dreadful, like Victorian type characters.
Oh, that's great. So would that be sort of like Jack the Ripper kind of?
Yes, in fact, there's a whole series of Ripper murders in Freedom City in the late 19th century that are attributed to one of Hades' minions. And we talk a little bit about the notion that Sherlock Holmes happened to be in town right around that time.
I love it. Sean says Red Death 2.
Yeah, Red Death 2 is an example of people poking around in supervillain layers where they shouldn't be.
Oh, I see. I was going to say Red Death 2 does not sound like the name I would pick if I were the first hero. So
No,
that makes sense.
not a good guy.
Not a good guy.
Love it. Okay, so let's jump back. And onward we go. So I love this art. It's phenomenal. It's got that awesome comic book kind of pop art feel. So we're right now where this is the history. Do you want to kind of jump ahead to the next section, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, basically the only other thing about the history that's noteworthy is that obviously Freedom City's history is also to a certain degree modeled on the history of comic books. So the particular era of Freedom City tends to reflect the way comics were at that time. So you have sort of the golden age of World War II, and you have the silver age in the 50s and 60s. And eventually it sort of gives way to just kind of a Bronze Age 70s and into the sort of Iron Age 80s and early 90s, and then sort of more of the retro revival after the Terminus invasion and essentially the publication of the first edition of Freedom City, which was also trying to do that sort of vibe.
Love it. Yeah. I'm looking at that now. That We Are Not Alone, 2004 to the present. So life in freedom. So
this is where we basically kind of break down all of the different aspects of life in a big city. From big business to education to, where people shop to where people go to school to, where people go to, see their favorite sporting events, what have you. This is the big catalog of, everything you want to know about Freedom City. So when somebody says, what's that over there? Basically you can say, oh, that is, the Hayes Brothers Jewelers that the, villains have just knocked over to, steal this rare diamond. And
I got it. I have a question real quick. So when you're putting these pieces together, what is the thought that goes into the use of it and the scenarios and circumstances, like we call them the user story. Yep. What were you thinking about, or who were you creating this particular section for?
Well, this area is both what I would call both player and game master facing. It basically has two main purposes. One is to give the city a sense of life. So it's to provide a lot of details so that Freedom City feels like a real place. And you can talk about any of its various features as far as that goes. And so you can as a player, you can route your character there in different ways by saying, well, my character works for this business or lives in this neighborhood or went to this school or goes to that school if the character is high school or college aged, or any number of other just details of life. So it adds a lot of that detail to just help bring the city to life.
I've got to throw this comment up real fast. Our friend over on YouTube, Rude Boy John, says, "Well, my M&M game starts in like 40 minutes. So I'm just taking a quick peek."
Well, thanks for dropping by.
That was awesome.
Absolutely, and I gotta tell you that is an acceptable excuse.
Absolutely.
My M&M game starts in like 40 minutes.
Right?
Well, you can't go anywhere, my friend.
But Alex is here for the duration, so he's already prepared.
Yep.
That's right.
Prepared's
That's
a
right,
strong word.
As much as any game master is truly ever prepared.
Right. All right. Yeah, you've got some kind of iconic businesses and things like Funtime Toys.
Yep. And of course, that's the other thing, is the other purpose of this section is just to provide hooks and ideas for the game master. So, for example, Funtime Toys is the business that was originally owned by the supervillain who became Toy Boy, and is now, passed on to its other stockholders. And of course, it's the place that, Toy Boy goes first when he's looking for his revenge scheme. And he wants to, send a massive booby-trapped toys out to the town. So it's also an adventure hook.
I love it. Yeah. And, who would suspect Toy Boy would be hanging out with the knockoff toys at the Funtime Toys? I love it. You've got you've got Megacorps.
Yep.
You've got, you've got the media stuff, the media mogul, Hank Allard.
Yep.
This is such good stuff. Let's see. One of the at what point in the timeline do you introduce some of the particularly nasty, big companies that are experimenting on other people's, lives?
Well, the villainous megacorp is pretty much the creation of the 80s. Like in the comics, although you had maybe a little bit before that, maybe late 70s. But pretty much the corporation as supervillain is definitely a product of the 80s Iron Age comics, and that definitely shows up in Freedom City's history. It's pretty much when you start seeing organizations like the Labyrinth using corporate fronts to do their evil genetic experiments and things like that. And you definitely see superheroes taking on, evil corporate fronts, as part of the history around that time.
I love that. As we move through, kind of into the next section, it's education. And I got to tell you, the Claremont Academy and all of the history and it is really one of, it's a fan favorite.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about it
all
the time. They want to see more of it.
Yep.
Getting, involved with more of that. Who kind of hatched the general sort of Claremont Academy, and there's like an opposing academy, if I understand?
Yeah, that came along later. But I originally designed Claremont Academy because it was one of the big subgenres of superheroes, which is, of course, teenage superheroes, that I wanted to include in the setting when I originally designed Freedom City. Mm-hmm. Claremont Academy, of course, is named for X-Men writer Chris Claremont, because it's very strongly inspired by Professor X's School for Gifted Youngsters sort of scenario, which was one of the original famous, Hero High types of schools.
But what if Professor X was Batman?
Right, but exactly. What if Grumpy Bruce Wayne from Batman Beyond was running, Professor X's school? Is pretty much, and it wasn't just mutants, but it was superpowered teenagers of all kinds. Is pretty much how you get Claremont Academy. Claremont Academy is inspired by pretty much every like Sky High, and there was an ancient Saturday morning cartoon called Hero High. In fact, that's also very much an inspiration for that kind of thing. And it's a huge amount of fun.
Yeah, if I could count, I should probably do the work on this. How many hours in my mind I spent at Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Students. I would have a degree in something. It may be bullshittery, but yeah, I mean, it's such an evocative space, and for so many people growing up, it was a phenomenal escape.
Absolutely.
So I think,
who of us as teenagers reading comic books didn't want to be, basically attending Professor X's school?
yeah, absolutely, right. And then Logicore says Claremont Academy. I go there.
Has a lot of students these days. And when we did Emerald City, the notion came along about basically doing, because part of one of the underlying sort of stories of Emerald City was that it was sort of a secret haven for supervillains for many years, which is why it kept this very low profile for such a long time. We were like, well, what if there was basically an equal and opposite version of Claremont Academy there that was basically the sort of the school for training young supervillains, which is where we came up with the Elysian Academy. And Alex right now is working on developing a adventure where it's a Claremont Elysian crossover.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to finally get that out. John Polojic handed over the initial draft, and we're working on it. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, should be fun.
That is awesome, and people clamor for it. That is phenomenal. And Sean Vieira says, "Wow, someone else recalls the Hero High cartoon."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing we do right, and it is remembering obscure.
Yeah, it is remembering obscure nerd media.
That's right. I mean, we are lousy with it. All right, so
I could have learned algebra.
Yep. Right.
But instead, I have that little dungeon master's voice from the cartoon in my head all the time and stuff.
Exactly. But instead, I remember all the dialogue from the D&D cartoons.
Right. I can, Crystal, who is normally with us and who's off on a mission and taking care of business, knows everything about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Absolutely. Indeed. Dialogue and all. So, all right. So anything special at Master Lee's School of Defense? I'm just curious.
Master Lee's School is, of course, named for Stan Lee and Bruce Lee as well, and is basically just the insert for if you want to have your, mysterious masters of Kung Fu characters hanging around. There is a sort of super powered Mr. Miyagi guy, in Freedom City, who is, the guy who, happens to teach all of these, Kung Fu masters and the like. And no doubt, I think we even mentioned it somewhere in here in the secrets. No doubt, he has at least one student who has gone bad, and has become a notorious assassin or ninja or the like.
That's that Cobra Kai kid.
Right, that his new students are going to have to deal with at some point.
I love it. After an unfortunate incident in which one of his first students used his skills for evil.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of weird martial arts groups, I learned, this isn't Freedom City, but in Emerald City, apparently Fight Club exists.
Yes.
I learned that this weekend.
Yes. But
how did you learn it?
But we're not allowed to talk about that.
We're not allowed to talk about it. But there's a villain in that book named Brad Durden.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So then we have the libraries, of course, and we've got the, how do you say that? Is it Beaudry?
Beaudry, yeah.
Beaudry Opera House.
The Beaudry Opera House is named after Wonder Woman's villain, the Silver Swan.
Hey, I love it. And that's what's kind of fun about this is like, if there's care taken to kind of have a unique name, I can pretty much bank that there's some historical sort of
Yep.
like.
I will note, by the way, that all of these awesome little insert maps were Philip going nuts and asking if he could do all of these like zoomed in detail sections of the city because he couldn't fit enough detail in the big map. And he was like, "Is it okay if I detail some smaller sections of the city?" And I'm like, yeah. Like,
I love it. Sounds to me
you want to keep you want to keep doing more maps? Sure.
Right. Yeah. It sounds to me like he got the theater. Yeah. He was living here.
Steve said, "Twist my arm."
Right. Like,
you're right.
more awesome maps. Okay.
I love it. Jonesy says I was too busy at Titan's Tower to be thinking of Xavier's.
Titan's Tower was where a lot of the cool kids were hanging out. I was too nerdy for the Titans.
Jonesy is a cool kid for sure. Let's see here. So, yeah, I love these. There we go. So then we've got, movie houses, museums. I do recall, I think I attended a museum soiree as a hero to save the day.
Well, sure. I mean, who doesn't have to, like rescue a bunch of people at some, like museum fundraiser where, a supervillain shows up in order to steal the, mystic MacGuffin or whatever that is they need to finish their plans. And, I don't know, animates a dinosaur skeleton or something to fight the heroes.
Oh, absolutely. It tweaks the nose of the filthy, filthy rich. But for us, it was a mystical McMuffin, so not the MacGuffin.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
And I will note, because Apook mentioned the Super Museum as a popular spot in the city. That obviously was both an homage to the Flash Museum, which is one of my favorite things from the comics. I just loved that the Flash had a museum dedicated to him. And he was like one of the only like DC superheroes who had his own museum for no apparent reason.
Right.
But it was just awesome that he did. And the fact that the museum just created a great sort of trophy room vibe for the setting. I always loved doing Freedom City adventures where the characters could like donate stuff to the Super Museum.
Oh, sure. I love it. I see this. This probably has no significance. What is the Kirby Museum of Fine Arts?
So, of course, the Kirby Museum is named after Jack Kirby, who is one of the ultimate comic book artists. So, of course, I had to name the art museum in the city after him.
I love it. You've got some artists in here. I see you've got a Raul Diaz, and you've got some. I mean, this is the fun stuff. But I have some bad news.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2:56.
Time has flown.
How did that happen?
It has. And
barely.
We're
barely through the players section.
I guess a quick question to the folks who are watching. I personally am having a blast, and I love this stuff. I'm wondering if. This is so funny. Sean says, when I worked for HP, I tested a plotter printer using a Freedom City map. I love that. Hey, Sean, was it you? I know it was one of the Seans, but you have actually done a lot of work in reaching out to some of the artists that have contributed artwork to this one of your favorite tabletop role play properties. Is that true? Is that you? Do I have that right, Sean? Let me know. But yeah, folks, I think we're going to need to carry this into the next stream. I do want to share some quick updates. I know we started just a little bit late, so we'll give you at least we'll at least fill your plate with the information. So we have no, I'm not Alexander Thomas. Hey, we have the Patreon is
might be, I don't
full
know.
speed ahead. So was in some instances a little late on getting some character stuff out. And so what I did is I ended up saying, here's a twofer. We're going to give you Changeling, and then we're also going to throw in Whoopant, because I'm telling you, Whoopant has a fan base, a real group of folks that are big fans. So, but then I also gave out, oh my gosh, what is it? Relentless and Never Stops? No, Dauntless and Relentless.
Dauntless and Relentless.
Yes. So those two are out. We also released the sections of the city for Starhaven, which we're still in summer.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's out there as well. And it helped me out here. I think, we're going to share the map and kind of show some where those areas are. It's a thing that we're going to be doing. And real quick, I want to say, Sean says one Whoopant fan here. And Sean says that is true, that that he's reached out to the artist. That's, it is a rare industry where that kind of thing can happen. It's kind of a testament to the closeness and the, proximity, much to maybe some folks' dismay, of the people who make these games and contribute art and the like. For our Patreon, we have got so much stuff cooking. I can't talk about some of it, but there's some things that everyone's going to be able to participate in. We are zeroing in on our print-on-demand T-shirt situation. Cool. Yeah, and so we're going to be powered by Mutants and Masterminds shirt. We're going to run the designs by the community so that they can, we can do we've got to pass it through the Shawns at least. Sure. And so if it survives, then pretty much it'll survive, anyone. The Johns not quite as relentless as the Shawns. Jonesy has provided a link in the chat. Talk to me, Alex. What do you got cooking? What's going on in your world?
What's going on in my world? Lots of stuff. I have Netherwar Tonight, our ongoing Mutants and Masterminds live stream that we do every Monday night. We are going finally into book number 3, Broken Strings. So we're getting away from my horrible stuff that I've been doing to them that I wrote and going back to the horrible stuff that other people wrote to do to them.
Broken Strings is so creepy, too.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited about that. Speaking of Toy Boy, I'm excited for him to finally show up in the story in a real visceral capacity.
Yeah, help me out here, Alex. I've been trying to think about what a Toy Boy would sound like. You have any kind of a maybe sort of an idea you could share on stream live?
I have a couple of weeks till he shows up for real, but I'm kind of thinking about going down into this sort of like high nasally, almost drooly sort of voice to bring him to life. But I kind of want to channel my Chucky from Child's Play.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, kind of bratty.
Yeah,
kind of like
he's a living toy or whatever, and he's stuck in this little body, and he really just wants to stick it to Una for what she did to him.
I love it. Well, so I'm looking forward to you perfecting that, and we will continue sort of the trajectory of your character.
Yeah, they ran into a teddy bear that had human teeth that was spying on them. That was pretty upsetting.
I own one of those in real life. I don't know if I should have said that live on stream, but I'm a weirdo. Can't help it. That's phenomenal. And then if people want to check out your stream and kind of watch the progress as you continue to torture the heroes.
Yeah, we will be live at twitch.tv/the Untold Stories Project, twitch.tv/Untold Stories Project at 7:30 tonight. So, we'll be live at 7, so an hour from now.
That's right. Well, here's what'll happen. We're going to retweet on the Green Ronin Twitter and share that information so you can stop by and get it directly. Cool. Absolutely. Steve, what's going on in your world? Anything to kind of share or pitch or kind of Mr. Nibbles?
That's a good name for that teddy bear.
Right.
That teddy bear. Yeah. Talk to me, Steve.
It's pretty much working on. I did some development work on John's adventure we talked about earlier. Working on Starhaven stuff. Keeping myself busy with some other non-Mutants and Masterminds, Green Ronin projects and the like.
I love it. Hey, I want to thank everybody who's been hanging out with us. There's more to unpack here with the Freedom City PDF and all the stuff around it. So we're going to bring that back. And you know what I think we'll do? I think that maybe at our next, sort of debut or this, our next phase of it, rather, we will give out some prizes.
Sounds good.
We love a good prize.
All right.
Right?
Me too. Thank you all. Thank you, Apook. Apook says I need the shirt in purple, and then we shall now call him Mr. Nibbles, and that will be your nickname from now on, Professor Nibbles.
Professor Nibbles. All
right, folks. Thanks. It sounds like I said Professor Nipples, and now that is exactly what I said. So
it's a teddy bear in a tweed jacket.
I love it. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. Oh, hey, don't forget to tune in 2 o'clock Pacific Thursday for Thursdays with Owen Casey Stevens, the nicest guy in the biz. And we'll have some fun. And we'll see you next Monday with some more Freedom City jazz. Thanks everyone.
Everybody.
And bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.